Thank you for joining us this morning. Today we're going to talk a little bit about fraud. Thank you for coming out on Friday morning on the third day of a trade show. We really appreciate you coming to see us. I'd like to let each of our guests introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. So if you want to get started.
Good morning. So Mark Sheffield, been in the industry since '93. The guy that hired me the day after I got out of the military is sitting in the second row here, so thanks to Perk. Worked small dealers, large dealers, worked for America's Powersports. Currently have some ownership in a dealership back in Texas, just north of San Antonio. Facilitate some 20 groups for Pfleider/NCM and on a few different boards. So on the National Powersports Dealer Association, doing a lot of work to try to help improve things for dealers to try to strengthen the relationship between manufacturers and dealers. So really, at this point in time, just trying to improve the industry and leave it in better shape than when I found it.
How long do I have?
45 minutes.
Sweet. I can say hello for 45 minutes. Dowdy. I'm with Transax. My previous life, I was in dealerships, did everything from wash cars to run the stores. Did a lot in training and development. Went over to the vendor side for a few years, OEM side on the automotive space with Hyundai for 8 years, running their training department. Most recently, I just left Harley-Davidson last year. Was there for 3 years running their global training department as well. So my view is dealer first. What is best for you, and how can we help you and help you sell more? So that's a little bit about me.
My name is Johnathan Aguero, and I'm with Blackpurl, a simple, powerful cloud-native dealership management software. Helps you get more done with the team you have. And man, my background's always been in software, helping make it easy for dealers to get their job done in automotive with companies like Dominion Affinitive, and making my way to today where, man, we're hoping to revolutionize the DMS experience.
Hi, my name's Lou Pedler. I'm the Director of Product Development for ZiiDMS. I've got about 25 plus years in the power sports industry. Started in dealership, selling parts, and kind of worked my way through the ranks of the dealership, and then on into the software world, where I've been here for about 15 years, helping dealers better their business. So thank you for being here.
Good morning. I'm Greg Pfleider. I'm the CEO of Accelerate to Compliance, and we're taking the compliancy of information security compliance and we're making it simple. We're keenly aware that nobody in the audience here got into this business because they wanted a PhD in how to secure consumer private data. So we have a solution, and we promote our solution in such a way where we want you selling and servicing product, not spending all day on information security compliance, which is why it's incumbent upon us to make our solution simple. And that's exactly what we do, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, great. We're going to dive into the questions now. Jared, could you take this first question for me? Could you explain the types of fraud that dealers are facing today?
Wow, there's everything. So there's a lot. I mean, we get it every day. I first joined over at Transax. Johnathan and I were having a conversation about it because we were working together. I got an email, and it looked like it was coming from him. And it was like, hey, can you reach out to the sales team? I need to get him these gift cards. Looked legit. So I called Johnathan up. I'm like, hey, why didn't you just call me? It was an email. It was fraud. Dealers are seeing that all day long. You're seeing online payments. You're seeing that one of the biggest ones right now is internal. You got to be careful for that. So there's a lot that's going on in the dealer space right now, but always be aware. Always double check. I think the biggest issue with that right now too is we focus on that when somebody's a new hire, having been in that space before. Hey, take this compliance training, fraud training, all that stuff. We do it once a year if you're a big corporation, and then we forget about it. And what happens through the rest of the year? Fraud comes in, and sure enough, somebody clicks on something and it downloads a virus, or payments come through, and now you have to unwind everything. So I would encourage you all to not ease up on that and to do continuous training throughout the year. Mystery shop people, send in some spies, get some tests, emails out, phone calls, that type of stuff, and see if people are reacting the right way to that. So,
Mark, would you like to add anything to that for us?
You know, we're really just seeing fraud from every angle at this point in time. It's even, day before yesterday, I got an email, looked legit, from an employee asking to change their direct deposit information, and it wasn't real. So it's really just a very common problem.
Great. Well, Mark, could you tell us who the perpetrators are? Like, who are the people that are doing all this fraud?
You're seeing a lot of employee fraud at this point in time. So, I mean, we've got parts employees, really make it easy for them, give them too much access into DMS, makes it pretty easy to infiltrate money out of the dealership. Had issues with salespeople actually working with other fraudulent parties. So, they may know somebody, be friends with, and actually come in and kind of help facilitate the sale and actually, not be legitimate. And, in the end, you go to work with Synchrony or whoever, and they're reaching out to you in a couple of weeks and going, hey, that was a false ID, and you signed off on everything internally. So it's you got crime rings that are out there at this point in time. You can go onto the dark web. You can buy 10,000 credit cards for less than $1 a piece at this point in time, and just try them over and over and over again. So we actually recently had an issue where we sent a customer a payment link, and the customer actually had just a whole list of credit cards, and because they had that payment link, they just kept trying new credit card numbers until they actually got one that worked.
Oh, wow. Jared, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, if you don't have and you're not conducting commerce online, if you're taking payments, whether it's through your parts department, service department, sales department, wherever you're taking payments, if you're doing it over the phone, or taking them without fraud protection, I implore you to please get something in place. Whether it's through a system, whether it's a third party, whatever it is, please get one and run everything through that. Do that ID verification. We've had, in our entire existence in transactions, we've had thousands of transactions that we've completed on behalf of the dealers, have had one instance of fraud, and it's because they turned it off for that transaction. So please get it. It's there to protect you. These, it doesn't cost a lot, but get those in place and make sure that we're doing that.
Great. Greg, could you tell us a little bit about what dealers should be doing today to mitigate their risk to fraud?
Absolutely. It really starts with establishing a culture of security at your dealership. It is absolutely imperative that dealers understand the paradigm has changed, as well as your buyer has changed. The generation that's coming up now is keenly aware about consumer private data being stolen. Those of us up here, we didn't have that when we were growing up, so we didn't see the prevalency of it, but we are certainly seeing it now. And establishing a culture of security is absolutely imperative for a dealer, and you don't have to retool your entire dealership in order to attain that goal. It's real simple piece parts of blocking and tackling and the fundamentals of information security that must become an integral part of your business. And we have to be keenly aware, both as vendors and as dealers, that more and more data is coming out suggesting that a consumer will not buy a product from a dealer who has been breached, which presents a very interesting paradigm in the sense that pretty much all dealers, every dealer in this room is going to be breached at one time or another. You may be being breached right now. You may have been breached already and you don't know it. So the first thing is establishing a culture of security and having best practices in place, which is simple assessments, understanding your own risks, having the right policies and procedures. In other words, if the SHIT hits the fan at your dealership, your employees know what to do when that happens. Having training, abundantly important, as well as understanding what your vendors are doing to protect the consumer private data that you have collected as a result of your course of business. So establishing a culture of security is absolutely the first step.
Lou, could you tell us what your thoughts on that are?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything that Greg said, and I think from the software side, one of the key things that we're learning is end-of-life software. As software providers, we do a lot of our own development. We do mostly our own development, but we also rely on other products within our software. Excuse me, and those products have end of life or they have upgrades, and we have to upgrade as they move on. And if you do use an end-of-life software, you've lost that security. So there's an open window for a cyber attack. Windows 10, end-of-life this year, October 14th. 65% of businesses are still operating on Windows 10, have not upgraded to Windows 11. Security will no longer be implemented by Microsoft on Windows 10 come October 14th. We all know Powersports is a little bit slower to adopt new technology, so I can only imagine that percentage is even higher in the Powersports industry. So from a dealer perspective, I would say, ask questions to your software providers, make sure they're not using end-of-life software, Make sure within your own walls you're upgrading, you're using the latest and greatest, you've got firewalls installed so you're not open to those attacks yourself.
Johnathan?
Hearing what everyone is talking about here so far, the thing that comes to mind is systems, Brian. We've talked about human systems. That's what a culture is. And, obviously Greg's company has a really cool platform that does that. There's a lot of other people in this room. Transax, Revvable, Rollick, 700 Credit, all have systems that help you be secure. Specifically, being a dealership management platform, one of the things that comes to mind for me is the fact that all your data is being stored in that DMS. All your customer data, you may have secure data, depends on your setup. And the fact is, you need to make sure, to lose point, that your software provider is secure. You got to make sure they're on the latest technology with multiple redundant backups so you can't lose it. Salesforce is the technology provider that our database runs on, and it runs government level security. That's important. Multi-factor authentication. Consider making sure you turn that on with your software providers. This is really important for internal fraud, one of the types of fraud Jared spoke about. Because when you have an employee with access to your entire system, maybe on their iPad, on their phone, whatever, what happens if they decide to go rogue a few days? You want to make sure you can turn off that access and protect your data. So fraud, in my opinion, comes down to systems. Use the tools, use the technological systems, create the human systems that it takes to keep you safe so that one breach is all it takes, doesn't happen.
You mentioned, a couple of you guys have mentioned, your own people being an issue. Johnathan, could you talk a little bit about, what that looks like? Like, how people within your dealership could be taking advantage of you, and then some things you could do to mitigate that?
Yeah, there's the advertent stuff and the inadvertent stuff. Mark Sheffield will have examples, I'm sure, of both. But what we hear from our friends who are dealers is that sometimes you'll have, could it be someone in the parts department who is appropriating some parts, cooking the books? Could it be someone who is sharing information with someone they shouldn't? Could it be someone who's taking shortcuts and not following your processes, and you need to detect them? Again, it comes down to systems where you have control. You see what people are doing. There are triggers set up to let you know if someone's doing that. And of course, having a software like what DX1 does or what Blackpurl does that makes it really easy to count your parts on a regular basis, that's key too. All of your inventory. So it's a matter of detection and prevention, in my opinion, Brian.
Mark, do you have any thoughts on that topic?
I'll give you a couple of examples, kind of move forward to your next question because it kind of builds on that, but give you a couple of examples that I've seen just very recently. Customer comes in, works with a parts employee, buys something, goes home. A few months later, your parts employee, who doesn't have any restrictions on what he can do in the DMS, says that customer came back, returned a part, put the refund back on the customer's credit card. Well, the problem with that transaction is that that customer never came back the second time to return a part, and the credit card that the refund went on to was the employee's personal credit card. And so now the only time you'll find that is at some point when you go through a new inventory and hey, this $300-400 part should be on the shelf, and it's not there, and then you kind of start going back and doing the work to figure out what exactly happened to that part. So I'm amazed at how many parts employees have figured this out, because just in the last year, I've had 3 dealers that caught employees doing that.
Wow.
And it's a very easy thing to control. You just turn off the ability for employees to wantonly do refunds and returns. And it requires a manager to come over and say, yeah, the part's actually coming back and it's going on to the customer's actual credit card. It's a very easy thing to control, but dealers get busy, they get sloppy, they give people too much access to the DMS. The other interesting one that dealt with, and this is about 4 months ago, a large marine dealer working with a customer, $270,000 boat. So they're going back and forth for about 3 months. So finally get to the point, very wealthy customer, gonna pay cash for the boat. So salesperson sends the customer wire transfer information. So customer's gonna wire the information to them. They had actually had somebody in their mail system for months watching all these communications going back and forth. And when the salesperson sent the customer the wire transfer information, the man in the middle was able to intercept that email and change the wire, the routing and the account information, and that's what the customer receives. The customer sent $270,000 to the perpetrator's account. You can't get that money back. That 270 grand is gone. So now there's actually litigation going back and forth about who's responsible for that transaction.
Oh, wow. That's a terrible story. Oh my gosh.
But it's an easy thing to control. So now, we put in process the place, at least at our dealership, and these guys have as well, is that when they send that customer that information, then they call and they actually have a conversation with the customer. So,
wow.
Unfortunately, these are all hard lessons we learn, but
I mean, that's a really hard lesson. Jared, that's a hard story to follow, but
Drop the mic, man. Jeez. Yeah. No, just to add a little bit of that, coming to Vegas, I went out and bought on Amazon an RFID wallet to protect my credit card from getting scanned. There are apps out there, there's technology out there where you can go scan credit cards. How many times as your salesperson getting a deal jacket together, sticks the credit card inside the deal jacket and takes it back to the finance department? All the time. So it's not just the back end where that's happening, it's frontline people as well. How easy would it be just to write that credit card number down, the security code on the back, and rack up a bunch of charges on that credit card, right? So that's a hard story to follow, but watch out for the front line as well. As much as you can put through and limit the access to processing payments via credit card, whatever it is, cash, bank wires, as much as you can limit the number of hands on that, the better off you're going to be. And again, it goes back to setting up processes for that, right? Everybody's kind of touched on that a little bit. So
it's really interesting. I just got back from Scotland for a couple of weeks, and when you're in Europe and you go to pay with a credit card, you never give their employees your credit card. So they have a remote machine, they walk up to you, you tap your card, they never actually see that. And I think it's so strange that here in this country, you give your credit card to an employee and they walk off and they're gone for 5 minutes and they come back. You don't know what they've done with it in that period of time. So, I mean, when you think about, most of you have probably had your credit card stolen at some point in time. Mine was just stolen 2 weeks ago. I only had the card for 2 months at that point in time. I don't know how they actually got it, but you think about all the times that you give your information to other people. I mean, we make it really easy for the criminals.
Jared, I actually had that happen to me last year in Las Vegas. I was here, and all 3 of my credit cards all had the same 3 fraudulent charges, and so I had to cancel. Like, one of them actually sent me a text message, and I was like, oh shoot! And then I checked the other one, so I had to cancel all of my cards. So now when I travel, I have $500 in my wallet because I kind of forgot about cash, But when you're in Las Vegas and none of your credit cards work, it's kind of hard. So I'd like to kind of make this question to everybody here. Let's talk about what it looks like day to day. So our audience here, all these people want to protect themselves from fraud. What's step 1, step 2, and what do they do day to day so that they don't end up having somebody steal their $270,000 for a boat?
Yeah, sure, I can take that one. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, Brian, about a culture of security. But what ostensibly does that mean? What it means is you practice what you preach. In other words, it's one thing to have a policy and a procedure for an event. It's another thing to act on that policy and procedure and to practice it and understand it. We've talked about some pretty interesting scenarios up here that are, quite frankly, downright scary, and I've heard stories that are even worse. And it really comes down to the fact that dealers must understand, with this culture of security, it starts with assessing yourself. In other words, how ugly is my baby, as they say? How ugly is my dealership from an information security perspective? Understanding where you are lacking in that area. And then putting the piece parts together to make sure that you are filling those holes. And those holes can be filled through policy and procedure. They can be filled through a number of different case study sequences and so forth. Training is a very integral part. It's amazing how many times, and we've talked about employee fraud up here, but a lot of times the employee fraud that's being committed, they're committing without even knowing it. I'll give you an example, is dark web. Mark, I think you talked about the dark web earlier, and it's alive and well, and we run dark web scans for our dealers all the time, and the amount of credentials that are sitting out on the dark web are astounding. Now, someone could look at that and they could say, well, it's on the dark web, I guess I'll just test my luck. Well, here's where the problem comes in. We're having breach occurrences all the time. AT&T, Home Depot, T-Mobile. You may have employees that use the same credentials to access your dealership DMS and the other software providers that you use are the same credentials they use to get to AT&T. So what does that mean? It means now your credentials are sitting out on the dark web, which means you basically have evites sitting out to nefarious actors on the dark web that says, come knock on my door. That's exactly what it is. And the amount of credentials that we see on the dark web for some dealers, sometimes it's in excess of 1,000. And these nefarious actors, all they have is time. Information is their currency. They can run as many credit cards as they want to run. They don't care. That's just part of their course of business. Same thing here. But it starts with understanding what your risks are and what you need to address, and that begins with a security assessment.
All right, that's a tough one to follow. I was going to go, the technology side of it. If you're running a dealership and you've got credit card machines that aren't integrated with your dealer management software system, then it opens you up to that ability to refund to any credit card that you want. If you're running an integrated payment solution, you lose that ability. So the internal employee no longer has that ability to make a refund to a credit card that differs from the original transaction. AP payment solution integration, so you take the checkbook out of your accountant's hands. You take that internal fraud and you limit that ability. So I think there's a lot of companies here within that can help mitigate the fraud within the dealership. To Greg's point, obviously that could also open you up to additional technology. Breaches, there's really no perfect solution, I think, but we all know some of that internal fraud is the biggest obstacle that we're fighting. The other point I wanted to make is that, we recently, not in the power sports industry, but in the auto industry, had a huge breach, and the auto industry lost billions of dollars in that breach because they lost the ability to run their dealership. So as a dealer, prepare yourself to run your dealership when something like that happens. It could be as simple as a power outage, right? You still have the doors open, you still want to take money, you still want to sell units, you want to sell parts and service. So prepare yourself with a backup plan, an action plan to be able to operate with, carbon copy ROs and handwrite sales deals. Don't let that be an opportunity for, the outsider to win and for you to lose business. So put an action plan into place to be able to continue to operate your business when something like that does happen.
Makes a lot of sense. I've heard from Greg, you need to get a security assessment. You need to do a checkup. Lou made the point, check your software. Have a backup. I'd like to expand on that second point. Check your software. And I'd say, make a plan. Map out from the beginning. Customer sensitive data. Okay, it comes in on my website through a finance application. Or it comes in directly keyed into my DMS system by an employee. And then track what are all the technology systems that I have. Okay, list them all out. List the level of security you have with each of them. Do you have multi-factor authentication where you got to have a second device or something to log into the account if you're a nefarious actor, to use that term. I would say check your finance applications. I learned this week that Revving, and I'm sure Transax as well, they have a lot of security involved in that finance application so that customers can't access information they shouldn't. Check the finance app and just go all the way through. Check the security, talk to your vendors if it's not available, and request it. That's what I'd say.
Okay. We are talking a lot about online, digital, and it's no surprise. We're a little bit behind the automotive industry, right? Powersports is. It's even worse on the trailer side of things where we operate as well. But let's not forget the fact that you have customers that are coming in every day, and you're not doing online applications with most of those customers. We're doing handwritten ones, right? It's not online. And what's happening with those applications? Is the finance office being locked up? Are they going in a secure cabinet, being locked up at all times? Is it opened? Who has access to that F&I department? That's a huge place for fraud. Anybody can come by, get a social security number, address, information, scan your driver's license, off you go. I mean, that's a really easy place. So I learned this phrase a long time ago, inspect what you expect. Don't just set the training, don't just set it. I said this earlier, don't set it and forget it. continually monitor, continually check, inspect what you expect at your dealership. So.
You know, I work with about 100 dealers, and so I get to hear a lot of horror stories. But when we go back and I talk to these dealers and kind of do the analysis of what actually went wrong, it's amazing as dealers how hard we work to ignore red flags. I mean, customers could just come in, you know, with a red flag saying, I'm a thief, and we'd be like, yeah, you know, that's a cool shirt, so where'd you get that from? It's really amazing how hard we work to ignore that, but we've really tried to work with our employees about looking at things that have happened in the past and having these discussions. If a customer pulls up in our lot with a Penske or a U-Haul van, that's a big red flag. Because Powersports vehicles, they go rent that, so they don't want to use their own vehicle. Very common that we see that. Customer calls and has a sense of urgency. Usually a lot of times really at the end of the day, you know, hey, I got to rush, I got to get out of here. That's a red flag for us. That's something that we're going to try to slow the process down. We need to check more things. Maybe we need to do this tomorrow. A lot of things like that when we go back and look, we're like, yeah, the customer gave us all the signals that they were trying to steal money from us. And we just chose to ignore those. And so in the end, it cost us a lot of money.
You know, Lou brought up the CDK outage in the car business last summer, and one of my sons was running a Honda dealership in Ohio, and there was not a manager in the store who was over 35, and when they had to work deals on paper, they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to figure out payments. So let's talk about, I mean, you guys have, several of you have said how the internal threat is so great. I mean, how do you avoid that? I mean, like you can restrict people, but like how do you? I mean, if you have a determined employee who's a criminal, like how do you prevent that? I mean, is it through hiring people? You know, like what do you do? I mean, a determined criminal is going to figure out a way to steal from you. How can you fight against that?
This might not be a popular opinion. You can't. It's not 100% perfect. It's going to happen. We can try all we want, but I mean, it's inevitable. Again, it goes back to inspecting your process and doing the checks and balances on a continual basis, not just setting it one time, doing the training once a year. Like continually check up on that, and that will help you eliminate some of the risk. But it's inevitable. And make sure you have the checks and balances in there if it does happen. What do you do if it does? What's your mitigation process? So anyway, I know Mark wants to hit me on the head for that one. Hard to try. Yeah.
Well, now, you guys have said that you need to inspect things and you need to monitor things. Like, how frequently is this something that is this something that a dealer needs to be looking at every single day? Is it something that they put a task on every Friday? I'm going to spend an hour in spot check. I mean, like, what does that look like? Like, what if you're trying to be responsible and you're trying to not become a victim? You know, what should they be doing?
Yeah, I'll touch on that one. I mean, I think, you know, from a dealership perspective, knowing your dealership day in and day out, running reports, doing a physical inventory regularly. You know, there's so many dealers that just don't do inventory, or maybe they do an annual inventory. I'm a huge proponent of doing inventory at least quarterly at a very, very minimum. Because you'll start to see trends in shrinkage, and if you're running reports, daily sales reports, things along those lines, you'll start to see, you know, trends from certain employees on, you know, physical inventory adjustments or refunds or incredibly heavy discounts, things along those lines. So really just being in tune with your dealership on a day-to-day basis, I think, is very important.
You know, sorry, you want to go?
After you.
You know, another one we've really been promoting over the last 6 months to a year is at least a monthly GM owner sitting down with a service manager and going through every open RO that's more than 30 days old. And it's amazing what happens to those old ROs. You get stuff out there that's a couple years old, and you've got an employee that knows about it, goes to the service counter, hey, can you sell this part to this RO? It's a couple of years old, and then that part just disappears out of the dealership. So, you know, it's just a lot of small things that you can do process-wise. You know, you said running the reports, but you really got to be in tune with your business, because any holes, any chinks in the armor, your employees will figure out what they are and take advantage of that.
Wow.
prevention is key, reducing the opportunity. And there's another way you can reduce the opportunity, and again, kind of a theme in some of my answers. If you go through your software systems that contain sensitive data, check your employees' permissions. Sometimes we add someone, we're in a hurry, or we don't want to offend them, or we think, they're trustworthy, they're a good person, I know their parents. In reality, you should limit every employee's access to what they have to do their job. That's another way to reduce the opportunity. We wouldn't put our Rolex collection out in our front drive, so we should put our most valuable data available for our new hires.
I think you also got to consider too, if you're going to hire an employee, especially in sales or finance, where they have access to social security numbers, payments, credit card information, you really need to be doing a background check on that person, a criminal background check. And not only just looking for, did they have any issues in the past, but looking for gaps. Because that 2-year gap in their unemployment history was when they were in prison or when they were in jail. So, and I'm not just making it up. I mean, this is stuff that we've actually seen before. So you have, as a dealership, a lot of liability. If you hire somebody who has stolen from customers before, and now all of a sudden you're giving them private customer information, and they get social security numbers, they get credit cards, they get checking information, they abuse that, you potentially are going to be liable for it.
Yeah, I'd add that a lot of the employees that steal from within a dealership, they're not career criminals. They're just opportunistic. They see an opportunity and they take advantage of it, and it's as simple as that. So you really got to just know your dealership and keep a close eye on it.
I mean, you guys have given some examples of like returning parts or old ROs. I mean, are these conversations that the dealer should maybe be having with their employees and saying, other dealerships have experienced this problem, and this is why it's not going to happen here? I mean, is that a conversation that you would recommend that they have with those people?
Absolutely, yeah.
Or maybe even ask them to keep an eye out for something like that. As opposed to saying, if you do it, I'm going to bust you. Say, hey, this is a problem that I heard about at my 20 group, and if you see anything like that going on, please let me know. Maybe you recruit them to be on your team.
I've even seen from being in some performance groups and attending those, dealerships will put spiffs out. If you catch somebody or you catch something that's fraudulent, we'll give you a spiff. I mean, little stuff like that, it goes a long way with the employees. So,
one last question, because we've talked a lot about the employees, but you had mentioned the dark web and credentials, and how dealers have there's so much out there, and it seems. I mean, I think about myself. Like I probably use the same password on 3 or 4 things, and how do you educate your employees, or how do you prevent them or make sure that they're not using the same password on AT&T or on Xfinity or wherever else they're going? Like how do you manage that?
Well, that's a great question, but I think it comes down to discussion and practice. There's no solution out there that, unfortunately, that you plug it in and your worries go away from a fraud perspective. It doesn't exist. Fraud is always going to be prevalent in your business, and it will stay there. But there are a lot of things you can do to mitigate it, and a lot of it has to do with discussion and activity with your employees. We talk to dealers all the time, and they say, we have a training program. We have my friend's college roommate comes in and he talks about security over coffee and donuts for a few hours on a Saturday. Well, certainly that's a nice start, but that really isn't education. Education is something that must be consistent. The discussions have to be consistent. You don't want to just be talking about, what are we doing from a process perspective in order to ensure that parts aren't being stolen. That's one facet of your business. Instead, the discussion needs to be, where are holes within our business and what can we do to fill them? Is it a process issue? Is it a training issue? It is a vendor issue? Or is it simply just our issue because we don't know how bad or good we are as it relates to protecting consumer private data and mitigating fraud? And it does come down to what I said in the first question. That culture of security must become a prevalent way in the course with which you do business. And the discussion can't be monthly. It can't be quarterly. It has to be a discussion that is constantly circulating amongst your dealership, because now we have AI, DeepSeek, and all these other things. If you think that these bad actors were creative before, it's only going to get monumentally worse. So it's very, very important that discussion practice.
Yeah, I think that Greg touched on the AI aspect of it. We used to get the trainings of what to look out for those phishing emails. It was misspellings. It was logos that were off. That's gone now. Emails are perfectly spelled. The logos are spot on. So you've really got to Greg's point, that training has to continuously happen and get better and get better, because obviously the criminals are getting better and better, and people fall for it. We do internal stuff constantly, and our internal employees fall for it, whether it's a password reset or an email from Best Buy that you won a contest. You know, it's things as simple as that. So you really have to constantly raise that awareness within.
You know, we got a lot of things pulling at us every day, but you know, you think about, you're busy, you got a new employee, you don't want to go into the manufacturer's DMS and set up a new account for them. So yeah, I'm going to give you my username, my password, and use that. Now all of a sudden everybody's got it, but that's the master one. And so, you know, that trying to streamline the business to make things easy to do, you know, now we've introduced that weakness into the dealership. I see it's a big thing for me. You know, I see a lot of dealers that allow employees to use their personal Gmail address or personal Yahoo address instead of a company. Why? Because a company address is $7 and I don't want to pay $7 a month to do that. And you know, now not only have you given an employee a license to maybe do some things, to set some things up with the manufacturer, and then they leave, they've still got access to that because you can't disable their account. But it's just it's a really big hole, and when those employees leave, now they take all that information with them. If it's a salesperson who's using their personal Gmail account, they've still got all those contacts that they can communicate to when they go to the next dealership.
Well, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you guys have in the audience. Does anybody have any questions for our guests today?
Not all at once, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from the part side of it, we're seeing a bigger rise in phone-in buys, high-ticket items. Is that something that's trending up, or you know, it's like, hey, I want to buy an Indian crankcase and crank, and it's a $5,000 purchase, and there, you know, we've got our things in place, which is like, hey man, for that dollar value, we need an in-person transaction, not an over the phone. So, but is that rising?
So that's a very common issue. You know, what's really unique about America versus the rest of the world is that here we, as the business, take on almost all the risk on credit card transactions, versus over in Europe, a lot of the other developed nations, when a consumer's card is compromised, they're responsible for those transactions until it's reported stolen. And so we do have to do some more things here in this country to prevent that. My counter to, you know, or I want to give customers options. And so what we do in that case, when it's somebody who we haven't dealt with before, and it's that $5,000 to $6,000 sweet spot that actually happens with those credit card transactions, is to give the customer the opportunity to pay with a wire transfer, because wire transfers are really hard to claw back. And so if the customer's got the money, here's the information, go ahead and send it to us, and we'll do that transaction. There is one other little unique one. It's kind of slowed down a little bit, but that same transaction can actually cost you twice, because that customer calls up and says, I want to pay for this with a credit card. They want a refund, but they will have, and this is that red flag situation. I need a refund, but that card was stolen. I've got a different card that I need you to put the refund on. I'm going to give you a different card number. And so the dealer puts that refund back on that person's personal credit card. So now you've given them $5,000 or $6,000. You can't claw back refunds in most cases. And so now you're going to have the original charge that's going to be charged back, and now you've given somebody $5,000 or $6,000.
Another step, there's software out there. We have a system that fraud prevention, DMSs have it. Like, everybody has it out there. I would say, yeah, it's great to have somebody come in and do it in person, but if you can install that software, have them go through your website and process the payment there. There is fraud checks. We have it. These guys have it. I mean, it'll check and make sure that is legit, and it catches it all day long. So,
You know, how frequently, I mean, for a dealership that's using that system, like how frequently are they seeing a fraud? Like, I mean, is it something that they have one that gets red flagged every day? Is it once a week? Is it like how much fraud is actually coming out of dealership?
yeah, I don't know what the statistics are on ours. It regularly catches them. And like I said, we had one instance of fraud, and it's because the dealer turned it off. So it'll catch him. It's sporadic. There's no rhyme or reason as to how. And once they know that you have that, they're going to avoid it and go a different route. So
I think a better way to coin that is the nefarious actors are always busy. They never stop. So you can have all the controls that you want to have internally, and that's certainly a great start. But the human element and the behavior element also must be a daily part of your practice. And the reason for that is that those same people, the humans, the human element is the one that's trying to hack you. So it's really, really important. I can't stress it enough that a dealer maintaining a culture of security is a part of doing business going forward. It's just the way that it is, because we've got sales practices, everything's digital, it's online. Lou talked about AI, and he's exactly right. I mean, you can get an email. I got an email just 2 days ago from my cousin who said, I'd love you to take a look at this picture that I sent of us at our Christmas reunion. And of course, I did not click on it, could check the email, it came from another place, but that's how creative they are. Not only is it just logos and things of that nature, they're touching your emotions now. They know about your life, and they know where you work and where you live and what you enjoy. That's how creative they're getting.
Well, hey guys, I appreciate you taking the time to be on this panel today, and thank you guys for taking the time to join us. Have a great show. Thanks. You guys did great.